So when was that area popping? Did it start to?
18 Vine, because the taverns.
Yeah, okay.
You had more. You had class joints there. You had the Blue Room, and you had Foxes, and you had the El Capitan. And those 3 joints right on 18, right on round surrounding 18 Vine. But 18 Vine was the center. You had Matlaw's, which was the style shop there. See, Kansas City is known for more than just barbecue. They're also known for styles, music and styles. See, black folks style, man. If you look at them then, you look at them now. In fact, we're thinking about putting a statue on the corner of 18 and Vine of Cab Calloway in a zoo suit.
Oh.
Yeah. An 18-foot statue of Cab Calloway in a zoo suit with the big hat with the feather. We're thinking about putting that statue on that corner.
That'd be something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was 19th and Vine like when the players
19th and Vine was like after our place was really after our spot. To be honest with you, it wasn't really a barbecue joint when we first bought it. Dad bought it after our spot. They worked from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock in the morning, and barbecue was secondary to actually what it was. You know, after 1:30 when the joints closed, everybody came around that place, and they had a little bootleg whiskey in the joint and had a little crap game going on downstairs. It was after our spot, you know. Until my mother came, of course, and she cleaned up the act, you know. Then it became a barbecue joint.
Ol Kentuck turned into Gates.
Ol Kentuck turned to Gates. Well, it was, in fact, Dad bought it from a guy named Johnny Thomas. And it was called Johnny's Ol Kentuck Barbecue. So he first started, Dad had a partner, so he couldn't name it Gates at that time. He went in partnership with a fellow, and they fell out right away, of course. Then it became Ol Kentuck Barbecue, and then Gates Ol Kentuck, then Gates Barbecue, and then Gates and Sons Barbecue. And Dad got mad at me and knocked out the son, so then it was just back to Gates.
Are you serious?
Yeah, Dad got mad at me. That was our big thing. Every now and then when he get mad at me, he say, no more and son.
I never knew. So it used to be called Gates and Sons.
Yeah, Gates and Sons.
Oh man! So these players, they were everyday. You said they were everyday folks.
Oh yeah. Well, see that was a different. Monarch was Kansas Cityans. I mean, they were people that were belonged to Kansas City. They were not like celebrities to us. They were like special people to us, but not celebrities. I mean, we was in awe with Satchel Paige. Like I looked up to him like a big brother, like somebody special in the neighborhood. But you didn't look at him like he was some mystic person. You looked at him just like he was a regular person, you know.
And you say these cats.
You sit right there. Yeah, move that back a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
It looks good.
Yeah, that's a good looking stuff. We do good stuff. We do good stuff.
Thank you, sir. And so these cats, they lived in the communities too.
They were part of the community. They weren't just ball players, but they were our ball players as a part of our community. They were, and the Chiefs were like that when they first came here. They were part of the community. Of course, you know, as time goes on, things kind of go the other way. But the Monarchs stayed that way because in 1947, when they transitioned to Jackie Robinson, well, the players, the main guys started leaving because they started buying them up in some different places. You know. So they really just kind of dismantled the Monarchs at that time, as we knew them as the Hall of Famers that most of them were at the time.
What was it like for you as a teenager? You're working behind the counter and seeing these players.
Yeah, well, it was good. You know, you had idols when you was a kid, and people in the neighborhood that you wanted to be like. I was never a great ball player, so I didn't look at the ball players as such, but I looked at them as somebody in the community that were somebody. And as a kid growing up, and of course on the street, I was raised on 19 Vine. You see those guys and with the big cars and the tall hats and the good-looking women, of course. There was something for you to look forward to.
Oh man, you know, remember last week I told you I was talking to Bob Kendrick.
Yeah.
Bob Kendrick told me. He said, yeah, buddy, if you ask him about Buck O'Neil, the first thing he gonna say, you know what he said?
What did he say?
You tell me.
I'll tell you.
What is it?
Well, see, you got to understand the ego a lot of those guys had, you know. They were somebody and they knew it, and everybody loved them, and they thought everybody loved them. I mean, that was just the thought of it. I mean, that was the end of it. So they came around when the joints closed. They all come around. Sometimes the ball players come around when they're in town, and sometimes they wouldn't. But one night they all came around, and they just won the ball game or getting ready to have the ball game. I don't remember exactly what happened for the ball field, but Buck and Satchel and a couple other guys came to the joint after the joints closed 1:30 in the morning. They're pretty happy, they've been drinking, so everybody was pretty happy and feeling pretty good. And so everybody was kissing and hugging somebody, but Buck came in the joint, and Buck, actually Buck thought he was cute. You gotta understand. Buck had a little streak in him. He thought he was cute than everybody else. He was a good-looking guy, but he thought he was cute. But my dad didn't think he was too cute, you know what I mean? So Buck came in, Mama was there in the restaurant that night, and he came in, Buck did loud, per usual, with Satchel Paige, and Buck grabbed my mother, hugged a big hug. Hello, that sweetheart and whatnot. My dad said, hey, wait just a second there, my friend. Back up. You don't hug my wife like that, you know what I mean? And so Buck took exception to that, Well, I'm there with me. I'm on my dad's side. I take exception to him hugging my mother like that. So Buck and I didn't start off too happy because my dad wasn't happy about that hug that Buck put on mother. So I really didn't take the Buck no more until I was plumb grown, and I was about 17 years old then. Yeah. And
so you had some sort of beef with Buck all throughout your teens and 20s.
Right, because of my dad. I mean, I had a beef with Buck because my dad had a beef with Buck, you know what I mean? So, you're going to follow your dad, you don't do that, you respect my father, I guess to say it like that.
Yes,
my dad was the kind of guy on 18 Vine, he demanded respect, and so he wanted his respect, and he got his respect, so. But that was the case with Buck and Dad, but that was an incident that happened. They didn't fight, he just told Buck backed off. Buck has been one thing, let me say, he's always been a gentleman. Buck has always been a gentleman. He's a class act, but he just overstepped his bounds, and I think he had maybe one too many, and he ran against the wrong person. That was all there was to that one.
But you all eventually became great friends.
We did, because, of course, I had another friend that brought us together, really, named Bruce Watkins, and Bruce and Buck were good friends. They were belonging in the same organizations. And then in 1960, when we I went into business myself, and Bruce was a running buddy of mine, and so he played golf with Buck. And so I played golf with Bruce, so we got to playing golf together. So our friendship grew, Actually had a chance to root, really. And I learned who Buck really was, and he respected me even as a youngster. And Buck, 15, 16 years older than me, but he respected me, and I appreciated that.
You say you learned who Buck really was. Who was he?
Well, Buck really was a great speaker, a class act, and a person that gave the next fellow the advantage. He did. He was a coach, and so he was good. Buck, I had a lot of respect for him. As time went on and got older, of course, I learned a lot from Buck. But Buck was a great speaker and a great personality, so I like Buck.
Tell me a bit about some of the other Negro Leagues players, the Monarchs. I know they were mainstays at the restaurant on 19th.
Yeah.
But you also had, I'd imagine, some folks from traveling teams when they used to come into town and stop by there as well.
Well, like? Buck was a first baseman, and he was good. But my favorite first baseman was a guy with the Indianapolis Clowns called Goose Tatum. Goose Tatum was probably the funniest and the greatest first baseman I had ever seen, because he had a glove about a mile long, and when he would snap the ball, he would snap the ball and then clip his toe to make sure you was a fancy out. You weren't just out, you were a fancy out. So everything the Clowns did, is what they were, the Clowns, they did it fancy. And so that was my favorite of all the players on the first base was Goose Tatum. But Buck was straight up first baseman. Goose Tatum was not a straight up first baseman. He was a clown first baseman. Mm-hmm. And he made everything. He played with the Globetrotters, Goose Tatum. And Goose Tatum was before Meadowlark Lemon. In fact, Meadowlark Lemon copied from Goose Tatum how to act on a basketball court.
He was a showman then.
Oh yeah, Goose Tatum was the goose. He was the showman. For him and Barney Marcus Haynes, they were the show for Globetrotters. They made the Globetrotters. The rest of the guys followed suit. But they're enjoyable. Now, there was a guy that I really admired that you probably never heard of that played with the Monarchs. His name was Newt Joseph.
Newt Joseph?
Newt Joseph.
Okay.
Newt Joseph was the back catcher for the Monarchs, but he was like second string. But he owned Monarch Cab. And the Monarch Cab Company was the #1 cab company in Kansas City in the black community. And so he had a farm out in Kansas. He was really a neighbor, a person that you admired and did not just for baseball, but for everybody. You go down, Newt would take you a ride. If you needed a ride, the Monarch Cab was right down 18th Vine. So Newt Joseph, he was a back catcher. And then, of course, there's another guy that I admired a lot too, named Frank Duncan, was a great catcher. But the best catcher of all of them was Mickey Taborn. Mickey Taborn was the first guy I ever seen that would catch the ball, and if a man got a single, he'd run behind the first baseman and back him up before the man got there with the ball. Oh, he was fast, Mickey Taborn was. I don't know if Buck ever told you about Mickey. You might ask him. Mickey Taborn was a great batter.
That's funny because catchers really aren't fast.
Yeah, but Mickey Taborn was. He'd back up the first baseman, I'll tell you that. He started that. The first one I ever seen do that, to be honest with you. And then my other favorite on the Monarchs team was a guy named Jesse Williams. Jesse Williams played second base. And Jesse Williams was a guy that when Jackie Robinson came to the Monarchs, he had to move off of second base and let Jackie play second base, and he went to shortstop. That was a guy named Jesse Williams. Great guy. Great golfer, as always. And we played golf together. Now see, that's one thing I liked about those guys, the Monarchs. You knew them. They were everyday guys. They weren't like, they were celebrities, but we didn't realize they were celebrities. They were just good guys that you know that you liked and admired. But Jesse was one of those guys that you really, really liked because he had a great personality. The one that didn't have a personality, probably one of the best third basemen you ever want to see, was one named Hank Thompson. He later went to the New York Giants, but Hank Thompson didn't say too much to nobody, but he was great. So that's the kind of guys that of the Monarchs that I really, really enjoyed, the Monarch team. And of course, Hilton Smith, who backed up Satchel Paige, he lived at 26 and Park, so he was like a neighbor too. And that boy's a Hall of Famer. Just neighbor, lived right down the street, around the corner, and his son was a great track star and ran with us, but his name was Hilton Jr. So, I mean, they were all part of the neighborhood. And you looked at those guys as somebody in the neighborhood that you look up to, a school teacher, you might look up to a preacher, you looked up to them, baseball players. That was their profession, so you looked up to them too. But you didn't hold them in awe, in high esteem so much that you just couldn't enjoy them for being a human being and being who they were. So you asked me earlier, did I take pictures of them? No, I had no reason to.
I saw them every day.
No. But I, of all the guys that I really enjoyed with the Monarchs and really had a good time with them, was a guy named Willard Brown, Big Lazy. He was a center fielder. He thought he was the mentor of all youngsters for what women are all about. He was he was a woman lover and a man. He thought he was. And always tried to tell me, youngster, what to do and how to do it, go about. I said, look, Willard, let me learn on my own. But Willard was I could tell you some stories, but I'd have to take them off the record about Willard. But he was all right. Willard
I remember one you told.
Yeah, Willard was all right. So that's kind of what I thought about all the Monarchs, except Satchel. And Satchel Paige, of course, he right now, I'm in an area where when I first met him, he lived at 12th and Park. And they tore his house down and put a grocery store there called Safeway. And he moved to Lockridge. But Satchel Paige was really not earthy. I mean, he was down to earth. It was just plain old Satchel Paige. Here I am, I'm coming at you, not only on the baseball field, but in life. And so he thought he was great in life, and he had a big ego, and that's Satchel Paige. And he's just like Muhammad Ali, I guess. I'm the greatest, and that's what Satchel Paige was. But you admired him for it. You didn't hold him in some kind of hostage because he said, I'm great. You liked him. And I like Satchel. Of course, he was somebody that you admired too. He had a big old black Lincoln convertible in 1946 years. And it was something to see. So I want a big car just like that. When I get grown. So this kind of guy. But
So big ego, big talent, big personality.
Yeah. In fact, felt so good about Satchel. You know, we built a stadium when I was on the park board. Was able to acquire a stadium called Catholic, was the Catholic Youth Stadium at one time for their sports, on 51st and Swope Parkway, and they had the creek had flooded. Town Park Creek and had ruined the stadium, and they had abandoned it. And so we grabbed that old stadium, fixed it all up, and named it for Satchel Paige. And it's there today, and that's how really RBI started in Kansas City through that stadium. And the RBI program now is a big thing all over. But that's where we initially started that stadium to be the RBI program for the city and tried to get the Royals involved in it then, yeah.
So baseball lives on through our younger generations, our current youth,
Yeah.
via the Kansas City Monarchs.
Say it again.
Baseball lives on all because of the Monarchs. I mean, if you look at it that way, Satchel Paige, I mean,
Yeah.
they laid the groundwork. They're kind of the blueprint for this.
They did. People, and you had, today, most of your black kids don't play baseball and box like they did when I was coming along. See, when I was coming along in the early 30s and 40s, baseball and boxing was the sport of the black kid. And that's because you couldn't get in basketball in the pros and you couldn't get in. So boxing, Joe Louis and that bunch, and then the Monarchs and the Negro National League allowed you to be somebody, even if your color was different than somebody else in the major leagues. So you had your own. So baseball was the thing because of the Monarchs or the Negro National League, and boxing because of Joe Louis. Mm-hmm. But when football came and basketball came and they started letting players play in it, then it became the sport of choice from the black. Mm-hmm. So now the RBI program started so they can return baseball back to the inner city, right. But the kids were taking up now basketball and football. That's the highest paying. And they wanted to go where there's a lot of money, and they don't want to box because they're going to get hurt, so they don't want to box too much. But, you know, you got a few champions, but not like it was in the old days, yeah.
Man, baseball money guaranteed now.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to dive into some of this, but as I do that, I want to do that, and I want you to talk to me a bit about the importance of barbecue and baseball, specifically barbecue and Negro League baseball. How does all this tie in, and how did all this tie in down there?
Well, the tie-in first with the Negro Baseball League, the only joints that stayed open after hours where all the baseball players coming on was barbecue joints. So they'd come around and they'd eat barbecue and mostly ribs. They didn't do a lot of beef at that time. They did pork mostly, but most of it was what you about there. Is ribs. We chopped up ribs, and we had another item we called mutton. They ate a lot of mutton and a lot of ribs. So those were the items of choice late at nighttime in the old community. And chili.
Not sliced meat, though. Sliced meat was not.
Sliced meat, no, there wasn't. Sliced meat didn't become popular till, I guess, in the 60s when pork was the thing. You don't want to eat too much pork, and so we went to beef, and so now the slicing machines got in handy. And barbecue wasn't a restaurant of choice because of how you had to cook it. Barbecue was a cheap meat, number one. Okay. All the ribs were cheap meat. Beef was brisket was cheap. Everything was cheap except ham, and you used boned in ham, and that was cheap. So that was a cheap meat. So you really tied barbecue with 18th Vine because most of the barbecue at that time was black owned. You only had a couple of them that wasn't black owned, and so that was inherent to 18th Vine black owned barbecue joints, Bryant's and Gates. The kid Sherman's and a couple others, but they were all around 19th Vine, and so until it kind of simmered until the Major League came to Kansas City in 1954. But when Major League came to Kansas City, we permeated the air with those odors from the barbecue joint that ascended up to 22nd and Brooklyn, mm-hmm. And all the announcers would say, "Where's that odor coming from? That barbecue odor." And so we just started sending food up to the stadium, and they would announce it. So that's how really Major League made barbecue industry in Kansas City.
Mm. So that's the reason why everybody knows Kansas City's barbecue.
Oh, that's where they got it from, because all the announcers that would talk good about Kansas City barbecue went all over, because 1954, when Major League hit Kansas City, that did it.
That's during the athletic days, huh?
Mel Harmon and my buddies, yes, sir. They did a job. And we enjoyed it. And then all the ball players started coming by. And once they started coming by, then you were in business. That was all it was to it.
You said earlier today that they were just players, so we weren't really in awe about them.
Right.
Next month, February 15th,
right.
marks 100 years since the inception of Negro Leagues. This all started here in Kansas City.
Right.
Should my generation and folks younger than me and everybody coming through now, should we be in awe? Why should we care about what was established 100 years ago?
Well, I don't know that you would care any more about that than you do about the sports that you enjoy, baseball, and know that there was somebody previous to these guys that really played the game well and respect. I was watching last night the game between Clemson and LSU, and they brought on some legends on the field of people, and they went back as far as Red Grange, and they went back as far as the Indian. Can't think of his name right. Yes, dude, Thorpe.
Jim Thorpe.
Jim Thorpe, yeah. They went back as far as them. Now, isn't that something to go back and how many Indians you think were proud to know that somebody made a legend out of Jim Thorpe? Well, that's what I think about black baseball players. We had legends and didn't even know we had legends. So, and they were right amongst you. And so I think that the black kids right now should look at history like anybody else does and be proud of who you are. And those guys really made you proud. And by the way, it started in the Buck O'Neill Center that we renamed the old YMCA. And it's 100 years old last year, 2 years ago, in fact. That the YMCA in 19th and Paseo, between 18th and 19th on Paseo.
That's where they signed the paperwork to start the Negro Leagues?
That's where it started, right there. It was organized right in that building. So it's there, and we're trying to make that building be receptive. And named it for Buck O'Neill. Yeah, that's a nice deal.
If I would have told young Ollie Gates
in
1946, 47, that in 2020,
we're
going to do this big to-do, this big gala, this big Centennial celebration for the Negro Leagues, what would you have said? Would you believe me?
Well, yeah, because it was a big deal then. Yeah, a big celebration. You know, when the Monarchs were playing on Sunday in Kansas City, the churches were let out early so we could go to the ball game. That's how big a deal it was. I mean, the Monarchs was that big a deal. If the church started at 11 o'clock and the ball game started at 1 o'clock, if we wasn't out there by 12 o'clock, the choir would get up and start moving. They would.
Really?
The guys in the choir would start saying, well, hey, I got to go to the ball game, Reverend. And so they start leaving out the choir loft and go to the ball game. Yeah, man.
That don't happen today when the Chiefs play.
Yeah.
It might now this year. They usually don't happen when the Chiefs play.
And that was a good deal because would they been, you like to watch. In fact, the whole setting around the Monarchs wasn't just the ball team. Those people go out there and try to outdress each other. They go out and see who's who out in the ballpark and see who looked the best. They didn't go out in jeans and slide shoes. They went out sharp as they could be, right straight from church. And all the ladies used to look good in church, so that's why they looked good at the ballpark. They wore their church clothes right on at the stadium. Yeah, right on 22nd in Brooklyn.
What do you think about seeing the Monarchs live on? For example, I wore the shirt on purpose.
Yeah.
It was the Monarch, Charlie Hustle making money off this now, but this all stems from the Kansas City Monarchs. What do you think when you see it living on through the youth, some of which might not even know where it come from?
What do I think as a youngster, how much you appreciate that? I think it's because of how much he loves the sport. If they really love the sport, they'd want to emulate somebody on that sport. And right now, I think it's up to us or to what you're doing as an announcer to remind those youngsters how much that meant to us, how much Jackie Robinson meant at the time to us. I remember this, to be honest with you. 1947, when the Brooklyn Dodgers were playing the New York Yankees. New York Yankees had a team. They had a monster of a team at that time. But all the black folk in the world gonna bet on the Dodgers. I don't care whether they were playing. They could have been playing the best team, super team in the world. They're gonna bet on the Dodgers because Jackie Robinson was playing. My mother got beat up so bad betting on the Dodgers to beat the Yankees, but her heart was with Jackie Robinson. And so that meant a lot. And that's what needs to be carried over because those barriers that they broke at the time, youngsters don't really understand all those barriers that you live through. And I watched one or two of the players come down the Negro Baseball League, and one of them said, and I'm not going to call his name because he's from the San Francisco Giants, but he said, I don't need to go through here. I live this thing. So I don't need to really go through and see the Negro Baseball League. He said, because I live this. And that's the way I feel about it. You know, I was there from the time they broke it in, the 1947. I'm in high school, you know. And so I realized because now I'm an athlete and I want to know whether I should be playing baseball. My dad said baseball. I said football. And Mama said basketball. So everybody had a different sport. But everybody was looking at the future, what's going on. At the time when I went to college, one of the best football players that I knew of at the time from Illinois, and he ended up with New York, he was making $5,000 a year. Buddy Young, best football player ever left Illinois. I was making that, the barbecue joint, so I didn't see no need to try to go to the league. But if you look back over and see what happened today, yeah, I wish, and I'm sure a lot of baseball players, Lenny Dawson, right here with the Kansas Chiefs, making $100,000 a year, and look at the ball players now making $17 million a year. So it's the timing. But
and Bob was saying all these stories, and he said that a lot of it was hearsay for him, but it's different from you.
Who?
Bob. He said the stories he hears about Negro Leagues are all hearsay for him.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I told him. I tell a lot of guys, I said, you're talking about what you read or what you heard. I'm talking about what I lived. So I lived with those guys. I was a youngster, but I lived with those guys. And I looked at them a whole lot different than what they look at. But I'm just saying to you, it's up to us to pronounce the past and announce what the future should bring. It's up for us living rather than those that died to make sure that the things are carried on.